For many years, the Madison Church of Christ in the Nashville area was the largest congregation in our fellowship. Ira North was the minister for many years. He described an attendance drive they had that included a fellowship dinner. A large tent was set up to house the dinner. It was advertised as the feeding of the 8,000 in 20 minutes. Each of the congregation's 2,000 family units were asked to bring enough food for their own family plus 6 people. That gave enough food for approximately 12,500 people. 80 serving lines were set up. On the day of the attendance drive, there were more than 8,000 present, and they filled their plates in 15 minutes. What an amazing accomplishment. It was a meal to remember. But while amazing, it cannot compare with the day Jesus fed 5,000 or more. That was a feast to remember. Our text this morning is Mark chapter 6, verses 30 through 44. We first see the prelude to the feast. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. We have the return of the 12. And here is, I think, the only time in the Gospel of Mark that they were called the apostles. The term apostles meaning those sent. They have been on a mission. Jesus had sent them out to teach, to cast out demons. They performed other miracles of healing. They have now returned. And as they return, there's all kinds of people coming and going. Jesus attracts large crowds. They are so busy, they don't even have a chance to eat. And so Jesus says to the 12, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." It is important for everyone to have a time of rest. Even preachers need to have a time of rest. Vance Havner said, "If you don't come apart and rest a while, you will come apart." Well, Jesus and the 12 get in a boat. They try to hide to a solitary place. The indication is maybe they weren't sailing by wind power. And they also apparently maybe weren't going very far out into the water, just going along the shore. Because when they get to their destination, a large crowd has actually got there ahead of them, going by foot. Well, Jesus sees this large crowd, and he had compassion on them. Jesus was a man of compassion. He cared about people. And Mark gives the qualifying statement, "They were like sheep without a shepherd." Now, the sheep were not kept in enclosed within fences. They were out in the open field. Shepherds basically herded them. And sheep, I am told, are not very smart. They need a shepherd to protect them, to take them to the watering places, to lead them to the pastures where there is food to eat, and they need protection from wild animals. Jesus says the people, these people that have assembled, they're like sheep without a shepherd. And it could be, I think is very likely, that as Jesus looks at these people, he realizes the failure of the spiritual shepherds of the day. Those who lead the religion of the day will spend a great deal of time straining at gnats while swallowing camels. They will discuss the finest aspect of the law. but at the same time, they're not really shepherding the people. They're not concerned enough about the welfare of the people. Well, Jesus, even though he's no doubt tired and the apostles are tired, they don't even have sufficient time to eat. He has compassion for the people, and so he teaches them. We then see the need for the feast, verses 35 through 40. By this time, it was late in the day. So his disciples came to him. "This is a remote place," they said, "and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But he answered, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "That would take 8 months of a man's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat?" "How many loaves do you have?" he asked. "Go and see." When they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. Well, you have this large crowd of people. We find out at the end of our text that there were 5,000 men, not counting any women and children that might have been there. This was a huge crowd. It's getting toward the end of the day. The disciples suggest, let's send the crowds away, send the people away, so that they can go into the towns that surround and get themselves something to eat. You know, this really was not the best suggestion if you think about it. You have small towns. We're not living in the days of McDonald's. We're not even living in the days, I don't think, of restaurants. To go into these towns, 5,000 plus, it could very easily overwhelm the towns as people were trying to find food. I am reminded of a school trip in the 7th grade. We stopped to eat a meal. We stopped at a drive-in restaurant, and most of us were eating there. But some of the boys said, well, this is too long a wait, and so they saw a little place across the road, and they had permission. They crossed the highway, and they got food there. And they came back and says, well, we basically bought them out. They weren't a very busy place. After all, they were across the road from the big drive-in restaurant. And they had the busiest day they'd probably had in forever, and just sold out of what they had. Well, yes, the disciples say, here's the need, and they have a suggestion of how to fill it, but it's really not a very good suggestion, is it? And here comes Jesus back with his reply, you give them something to eat. Can't you just kind of, what is Jesus saying? How does he expect us to feed this many people? And so they reply, you know, that would take 8 months of a man's wages. Don't know how they came up with that figure, but it was a lot of money. And are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? And there again, where would they even find that much bread to buy if they had the money? These are the 12 who had just come back from a mission of some length of time when they were told not to take any money with them. Well, they said, we can't do that. We can't help. And so then Jesus says, okay, let's take an accounting. How many loaves do you have? Go and see. Let's just see what's available. Well, we learned from John's gospel that it was Andrew who went and found a little boy, and he had his lunch. 5 loaves and 2 fish. Now these weren't the, a pound and a half loaf that we get at the grocery store. No, this is much smaller, and perhaps even a barley loaf, which was the bread of the poor. And these fish were dried salt fish, more than likely, maybe somewhat like sardines. This was not a lot of food. Well, Jesus gives directions then. Have everybody sit down in groups on the green grass. And they sat down in groups of 50s and 100. This was going to be organized. You have 5,000 people or more. You need some organization to accomplish them. We notice that Mark gives some interesting details. Now, Mark is the gospel on the run, as we've entitled our series. He moves along quickly, but it's interesting that from time to time he gives details that the other gospels don't give. He talks about the green grass. That indicates it's probably springtime. The Message, in translating this passage, does a little bit of commentary. It says, "The hungry multitude looked like a patchwork quilt of wildflowers spread out on the green grass." That is kind of a picture. If you get a little bit of an aerial view, and you see all of these people, hundreds, thousands of people, sitting on the grass. What a sight. Well, here they are. We've got the people. They're hungry. What about the food? Well, then we come to the miracle of the feast. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to eat set before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 baskets full of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of the men who had eaten was 5,000. 5 loaves and 2 fish, 5,000 people or more. How's that going to work? The apostles can't do anything. They've been given some ability to heal and cast out demons. But Jesus knows what to do. He has the power. He gives thanks for what is there. And he gives to the disciples. And they began to give food to the people. And this food just multiplies. There's more and more of it. This is a miracle. Now, it is interesting that some have resorted to desperate measures in an effort to explain away the miracle. Some claim that Jesus had a secret stash of food hidden in a cave. Well, it should be noted that the crowd may not have even realized that the feeding was miraculous. The 12 did. We're not told that the crowd realized where the food came from. Albert Schweitzer contended that the rich and pious ladies used to inquire of Jesus where he thought he would be preaching to people on a given day, and they would send baskets of bread and dried fish to the spot where he indicated, that the multitude might not suffer hunger. Others argue that Jesus got his disciples to share their own provisions, which they had selfishly hidden for themselves. And when the crowd observed their generosity, they also shared what they had with others. William Barclay claimed, "This is a miracle of the birth of love in men's souls. It is a miracle of the awakening of fellowship in men's souls. It is the eternal miracle of Christianity, whereby a miscellaneous crowd of men and women becomes a family in Christ." You know, when you try to explain away the miraculous, what you come up with is ridiculous. Let us think about this for a moment. We are here on this earth. This earth is a small part of a vast universe. This did not happen. Something does not come from nothing. Design does not come without a designer. God created the universe. He created us. A God who can do that can enable his Son to make 5 loaves and 2 fish into enough food to feed a multitude with leftovers. Isn't it interesting that there were more leftovers than the food they had to begin with? 12 baskets full. Now, there's a very important object lesson in this miracle. We note that this is the only miracle of Jesus recorded in all 4 Gospels. That's pretty significant, don't you think? Most of the crowd, maybe all of the crowd, was unaware of just where all this food came from. But the 12 knew. They knew that what they had found was 5 loaves and 2 fish. And they knew that after Jesus gave thanks as he gave them food, and as they passed out food, that there was just food and food and food. You know, another person trying to explain away the miracle says, well, everybody just got a little bite to eat. That's pretty desperate, isn't it? No, everybody had enough to eat to be satisfied. The 12 saw the power of Jesus. Now we're going to see very shortly as we read along through Mark, they didn't quite yet get the point though. But later on, as they think back, they're going to remember that Jesus is all powerful. And so Jesus once again has demonstrated his great power. We must not miss the point that the disciples don't fully understand the power of Jesus yet. William Lane wrote, Jesus' extended discussion with them, that is the 12, prior to the event, baffled them, while his wordless disclosure of his divine power through the event exceeded all understanding. And David Garland said, in feeding the 5,000, Mark shows that Jesus exercises God's power and uses it for the good of his flock. He is the true shepherd of his people who provides the necessities of their spiritual and physical life.